Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new Analyzing Stories. And today I'm going to analyze a TED talk about the danger of the single story. This is one of my personal favorites when it comes to storytelling. And I, in particular, want to look at the structure of this specific talk with you because it has a beautiful structure, I believe. And it's really interesting to see how she structured this story and the plot that she uses all throughout it. So for everyone who's already read and looked into my guide, my storytelling guide, Rest and Fluids, some things might be familiar for you because I talk about the specific structure in my guide and I talk about the plot as well of this talk. So everyone who doesn't own a copy of it or hasn't downloaded it or has never heard of it, I will post a link so that you can download it yourself as well. My technical guide into storytelling, which will be very helpful as a starter to get into what storytelling really is, especially in public speaking. So first, let's look into the start and let's see what is it, the structure that I was talking about. In this particular case, I'm talking about the story Spine by Pixar. That is a very specific structure. It is really basic. It is really simplified, but for that reason, it is super useful. It is, you understand it right away. You can link it to all kinds of different stories you already know. So that makes it very useful and very easy to understand. Basically, what it says is, once upon a time there was. Every day, one day, because of that, until finally. So this is basically every fairy tale you know. Most of the stories you know will follow this structure. So once upon a time, a little description about your main character. Every day, nothing going on, nothing special, just everyday business as usual. Until one day, something changes. Because of that, until finally, the big climax, the end. So this is the story structure that Chimamanda uses here as well in her TED Talk. And then there's also a specific plot. In my guide, Rest and Fluids, I talk about the 9 different plots that were developed by Booker. And the 9 different plots, you can basically categorize any story in one of these 9 plots. Of course, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's basically you would be able to do that. And this specific story follows the voyage and return plot. This means the voyage and return plot is the hero travels to a far-off place, overcomes all these obstacles, and then brings back new insights and new knowledge, new experience to the place they actually came from. This is what this TED Talk is about as well. So let's take a look at the once upon a time and the everyday. So that's the first 2 parts of this. Once upon a time and everyday.
I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of gin.
There we go. Once upon a time there was a young girl growing up in Nigeria, and every day she would read books. Every day she would write stories, and this is what those stories look like. They did not represent herself and everything she saw around her. So this is the premise. This is the introduction. This is the once upon a time, and which explains a bit about the main character, which introduces the main character, and then the everyday, just painting a picture of how it always goes. Nothing strange going on. But then we have the one day. This is a little hint. The first, or the next little thing that I'm going to show you is the first hint towards change. This is the first journey she goes on. She actually goes outside of her own town to visit the family of the boy that's been working for them, for their domestic help, because that was the custom when she was growing up, to have domestic help if you were in a certain class. Let's take a look. This is but one day.
Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit, and his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later,
so she goes out of her own town, out of her own house, to a small village where the boy who is their domestic help, he grew up. And her mother had always told her that their family was very poor. That's all her mother had ever told her. So that's the only way she saw them. And then she went to visit the village, visit his family, and she saw that they were poor, but that was not everything they were. That's not all of them. They were full, complex human beings, and they made stuff, and they worked really hard. So this is her first encounter of the danger of the single story. So this is the one day. And now the next two examples are also examples of the single story. But here she recognizes the pattern. She sees what's going on here. So it's because of that, the first one. She moved to the US and went to college there when she was 19. And in college, she has an American roommate. And this little bit is about her American roommate.
She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music, and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe.
So here she experiences the single story from a different side. She goes out, she ventures out of her own country, and there she encounters the dangers of the single story from a different point of view. Now she is the victim here. She is the single story herself, rather than she owns a single story. She has a single story about someone else. So here she sees that. And then we have the second because of that. We have that right here. She lives in the United States, and the whole discussion about immigration in the United States had become synonymous with Mexico and Mexican people in particular. So she has gotten used to hearing stories about Mexico and about Mexicans that were all about immigration and being poor and stealing jobs and those kinds of stories. So here we go. She goes to Mexico.
I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought it.
So she says she was overcome with shame because by now she had had enough experiences to know better than that, to know better than just rely on the single story. So she's gotten further, she's gotten the new knowledge, the new insights through traveling. And as it goes with a voyage and return plot, she now brings back that knowledge back to where she came from, back home. So this is the final because of that. As 14, yes, there we go, 1354. Here she shows her new insights.
The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. So what if before
her new insights, the things she's learned through her voyage. This is where it all dawns on her, where she processes it and gives words to it until finally, and I screwed up the timing here before, but just go back a few seconds. Until finally here, she explains how she's bringing this back to Nigeria, back to where she came from.
Novel, I went to a TV station in Lagos to do an interview. And a woman who worked there as a messenger came up to me and said, "I really liked your novel. I didn't like the ending. Now you must write a sequel, and this is what will happen." And she went on to tell me what to write in the sequel. Now, I was not only charmed, I was very moved. Here was a woman, part of the ordinary masses of Nigerians who were not supposed to be readers. She had not only read the book, but she had taken ownership of it and felt justified in telling me what to write in the sequel.
So here, in the end, the roles are reversed here. She goes back to Nigeria and then recognizes other people's single stories, the single stories that there are about people. And she manages to break through it by going back, writing, publishing books, going on interviews, and showing people. Also, obviously, through this TED Talk, showing them her new insights, her new experiences, her new knowledge by coming back. I think this is a beautiful talk because of this beautiful structure and this beautiful plot. You don't see that many talks, presentations, speeches that have such a clear plot that really are one story. And this is one story. She uses different anecdotes in the story. She uses quotes from other people, but all of it leads up to that one final point. It's all the voyage and return. Very, very beautifully done. She is a writer. She is an author, so she knows stories. She knows how to construct a beautiful story. But that doesn't always mean that you're also a good speaker. But Chimamanda, she is. She definitely is. All right. Thanks for watching this Analyzing Stories of The Danger of a Single Story, one of my absolute personal favorites when it comes to TED Talks. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe here, and I'll see you later. Ciao.